Hello, this is Catherine from Accelerated Reader. Today, I will be reading Peter and the Parachute by Nicola Ridgeway and James Manning, illustrated by Irena Urosevic. Before I begin reading, I would like to give a big thanks to the authors for sending me this book to read on my channel. In the description below, I have included links where you may find and purchase this book. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Chapter 1: A Long Way Down. Perched high up in one of the tallest trees in the rocky wilderness of Wisconsin was a large nest. In it sat Peter, a 3-month-old eagle. Peter had just lost all his fluffy, white feathers and was now shiny and brown with golden specks. Not far away from him, perched on a branch, was his mom. "Come on, Peter," his mom said softly. "It's time for you to fly the nest now. Your sister flew off weeks ago. This nest is for little hatchlings, not for a gangly teenager." Peter peered over the nest wall. "But it's such a long way down," he whined, his body trembling with fright. "What if I fall?" "You won't fall," laughed Mom. "You can fly. That's what your wings are for." Peter nodded, puffing out his chest and trying to look braver than he felt. Mom waved a claw at her son. "What's that lumpy bag on your back with all the strings and dangly bits? I've never seen anything like it." "It's a parachute," mumbled Peter, feeling a little embarrassed. "If I fall, it will open up like a big umbrella and keep me safe." "You don't need that," chuckled Mom. "Not when we have such strong wings." She opened her wings to show him. Peter nodded. Mom's wings did look very big and very strong, but they were her wings, not his. "But my wings look so small," sighed Peter, "and they don't feel strong at all." "Don't be silly," said Mom. "You can fly higher than the clouds." "But how do you know?" asked Peter. "Peter, no birds know if they can fly until they try to fly." "You just have to go for it," said Mom, nudging him playfully. "All you need is a little self-confidence." Peter's eyes narrowed as he asked, "What's self-confidence?" "It's a feeling that you get from in here," said Mom, patting her feathery chest, "telling you everything is going to be all right." "What if I don't have that feeling?" asked Peter. "You will when you start to fly. Trust me, Peter," said Mom calmly. But Peter was still unconvinced. "I think it's best if I stay here in the nest, Mom. It's much safer." "Peter!" said Mom sternly as she stood tall. "Peter!" said Mom sternly as she stood up tall and ruffled her wings. "You're almost a fully grown bird. Pop and I cannot keep feeding you forever. Soon you must catch your own food." "But what if I can't?" said Peter, hopping nervously from claw to claw. "It looks very difficult." Mom tutted and rolled her eyes. "Even silly sparrows can catch food." "Worms, Mom. They just catch worms. I gotta catch rabbits and they can run," replied Peter. "Peter, try to remember that you are a bird of prey. We have the keenest eyes and the sharpest claws. When we fly high up in the sky, we can see everything. So catching prey is easy," whispered Mom. "What if I can't see from up there?" asked Peter. "Look down below, Peter. his mom instructed him while nudging him over the wall of the nest. You can see that small pink flower growing in the grass? Look down below, Peter, his mom instructed him while nudging him over to the wall of the nest. Can you see that small pink flower growing in the grass? Yes, I see it, but what if I can't see it from all the way up there? Persisted Peter, looking up at the fluffy clouds. You will, answered his mom. Trust me, Peter, as soon as you try flying, you will discover how talented a hunter you are. Doing is often the best way to learn. Peter nodded, though he kept his eyes down, peering at his clawed feet. His mom sighed. I have to do a little hunting now. Your pop has invited your Uncle Apollo around later, so don't forget to prune your feathers before he comes. And with that, Mom flew off. Chapter 2. Uncle Apollo tells his story. After Peter had finished checking the straps on his parachute for the 7th time that day, he spotted a small dot high up in the sky, and it was getting bigger and bigger. Peter saw that it was another golden eagle. It was swooping and diving like an out-of-control rocket. A few seconds later, it landed gracefully on a branch next to the young bird's nest. Hi, I'm your Uncle Apollo, the eagle announced, pruning his feathers with his beak. I'm Peter, stuttered Peter, offering his wing. Peter remembered that his pop did this when he met other eagles. I'm pleased to meet you. Good to meet you too, said Apollo, offering his wing in return. I'm sorry, I must have come at the wrong time, said Apollo, looking around and raising his wing over his eyes. I can't see your mom and pop anywhere. Perhaps I'll come back later. Can you stay for a while? Asked Peter. I don't get to talk to too many eagles apart from Mom and Pop. Apollo pulled his wings back into position and nodded. Forgive me, Peter, but what's that curious thing you're wearing? It looks very unusual, muttered Apollo as he stretched his neck to look behind Peter at his parachute. It's a parachute, replied Peter. You see, I'm terribly frightened of falling, but this will protect me, if anything goes wrong. That's amazing, replied Apollo, as he continued to look closely at the parachute. How far can you fly? Asked Peter, attempting to bring Apollo's attention back to their conversation, rather than his parachute. Most birds of prey don't travel as far as me, said Apollo proudly, while sticking out his chest. Uncle Apollo, Peter decided, was not the most modest of birds. I know your mom and pop like to stay in the valley, but I love exploring the world, continued Apollo. I would love to explore one day, sighed Peter. How high can you fly? Very, very high, Uncle Apollo told him, puffing out his chest even further. Higher than woodpeckers. Higher than gulls, and much, much higher than condors. He winked at Peter. Even higher than the clouds. But how? Asked the younger eagle, looking at his uncle in awe. His uncle grinned. Peter suspected Apollo enjoyed telling a story. One day, I remember it was a Monday because I don't like Mondays. I was a little bored. So I decided to see how high I could fly. Up and up and up I went, flying so high I didn't even need to flap my wings. It was such fun up there, I can tell you. I'll never be able to do that, said Peter morosely. Why not? Asked Uncle Apollo. There always has to be one eagle who is the worst at everything, sighed Peter. Peter, I've flown all the way across America, not 1 time, not 2 times, but 5. Yes, 5 times. The first time I did it, I felt really tired and often thought about giving up. But I kept on flapping my wings. On that journey, I flew further than most birds fly in a lifetime. The next time I did it, it was not difficult at all. The 3rd time, it was a breeze. But how? Peter asked, feeling very confused. The distance didn't get any shorter. Well, the 2nd and 3rd time I did the flight, I already knew I could do it. His uncle lectured him. So I only had to focus on flying. Yes, I see, nodded Peter, pretending to understand. Peter was never free of doubt, so he couldn't really imagine what it felt like. Before I go, I must tell you a little riddle I heard the other day. Okay, Peter loved a good riddle. How do you fly a long, long, long way? His uncle asked. Peter frowned. Do you give up? Go on, give up. His uncle was jumping up and down, so much so, Peter wondered if he needed the loo. You'll never get it. Okay, tell me. Peter didn't want the bird to explode. 1 flap at a time, hollered Uncle Apollo, holding his tummy as he rocked with laughter. That's, very funny, said Peter, pretending to laugh. Yes, it is. Anyway, I must be off. Tell your mom and pop that I'll stop by a little later. And with that, Uncle Apollo opened his wings and drifted off over the valley. Chapter 3. From Tiny Runt to Ace Pilot. Peter was on his own practicing jumping from branch to branch while wearing his parachute when he heard rustling in a nearby tree. Who's there? Called Peter. I'm your mom's old pal, Ace, bellowed an eagle in a very deep, croaky tenor. It would be good to meet you. Why don't you come over to this tree? Shouted Peter. Suddenly, Peter was nearly knocked over by the biggest vibration he'd ever felt. It seemed as though the whole tree was shaking. Peter looked up and was surprised to see the largest and most magnificent eagle standing over him. He was larger than Uncle Apollo and even bigger than Pop. The large eagle pecked at the bulky sack on Peter's back. What's this for? It's to keep me safe, answered Peter shyly. You see, if I find that I can't fly, I'll pull on this string here. He jabbed his wing at the string. To show him, a parachute opens up and I will drift down and not, crush down. Oh, I see, Ace nodded, scratching his chin with his wing, which is a very difficult thing to do for a bird. I'm confused. You're almost a full-grown bird of prey. Your wings look strong. They're almost as big as mine. But I don't know if my wings will work. How did you find out that your wings worked? Shot back Peter. Ace sighed. Look, I'm going to tell you something about me. And not many birds know this apart from your mom, so keep it a secret. I fell from the nest. But if you fell so far, how are you okay? Squealed Peter. Let me tell you, whispered Ace. Peter nodded, settling down to enjoy the story. When I was born, I was the last of 3 hatchlings. With a bigger brother and sister, it was very difficult to get food. We were always fighting over it, pushing and shoving. Then one day, I was pushed so hard, I tumbled out of the nest. Were you hurt? Gasped Peter. A little, but mostly just shook up. I flapped and flapped as I fell, which I think helped a little. Oh, and luckily, I landed on a patch of soft grass. What happened next? Asked Peter. The story was scary, but it was exciting too. I needed to get back up to the nest, but I was too big for my mom and Pa to carry. The only way was to fly up there myself, so that's what I did. How? The younger bird wanted to know. By flapping my wings over and over and over for more than a month. In the end, I hoped they'd be strong enough so that I could fly. Cool. The only problem was the wolf. There was a wolf? Gasped Peter with a shudder. Ace nodded. One night, it was dark and cold, and I was huddled under a bush. My mom and Pa were keeping watch up on the cliff, so I thought I'd be okay to get a little sleep. But as I was just drifting off, there was a low growl, and when I opened my eyes, there was a wolf glaring down at me. What did you do? I panicked and flapped my wings as hard as I could, and suddenly, to my surprise, and the wolf's, I took off. You must have been very frightened, gasped Peter. I was, agreed Ace, but it helped me develop into a much stronger bird. After escaping the wolf, I knew I could do anything. I had a survival instinct. What if my survival instinct's not working? How do I know I've even got one? Asked Peter. Everybody has a survival instinct, Ace told him with a kindly pat on his back. Trust me, when you need it, it'll be there. With that, Ace opened his wings and flew off. Goodbye and good luck, Peter, he called back to him. Trust your survival instinct. Peter was left thinking about Ace's story. He felt lucky that he was still sat safely in his nest. However, Ace's story gave him a little food for thought. He hoped that one day he would be a magnificent golden eagle just like Ace and his uncle Apollo. Chapter 4. A very confident-looking bird. A day or two passed, and Peter kept peeking over the wall of his nest at the long, long drop to the valley floor. It still looked so very far away. Perhaps I could try to fly, thought Peter, as he attempted to open his wings. But Peter had grown so big, and his wings had grown so long, there was no longer any room. Oh no, he thought. Mom will soon order me from the nest. He felt for his parachute and stroked it for comfort. That thing's not going to help you, said a voice from behind him. Peter jumped and swung around. There, perched on the nest wall, was the most elegant-looking bird he'd ever seen. Hi! Peter offered her his wing, and they shook. I think I know you, don't I? You're my cousin Venus. Papa's shown me photos of you. He told me you're the most confident golden eagle he knows. Yes, I'm Venus, the bird said with a tiny bow. And that was very nice of him to say, but the thing is, I might look confident, but I'm very different in here. She patted her chest. Peter scowled. I don't follow. The truth is that I feel nervous about all sorts of things, Venus told him. But if I try to do it, and I do my very best, I get better at it. I was nervous the first time I flew because I had never done it before. I stood on the edge of the nest, waiting for a time when I felt that I would be okay. But that time just didn't seem to come. But you can fly now. So what did you do? Asked Peter. For a while, I did the same thing over and over, going to the edge of the nest, looking down, and then going back into the nest again. This went on for weeks. Meanwhile, I could see my brother flying everywhere. It seemed so easy for him. Then, one day, I knew I just had to do it. I stood on the edge of the nest and spread my wings wide. I felt really frightened, but a voice in my head said, "Just do it." So I jumped off the edge of the nest. Within seconds, I was flying. It was the most incredible feeling in the world. I felt so much more confident because I knew I could fly. And that's not the end of the story. The feeling of my first flight was so powerful that it stayed with me for ages. It helped me in all kinds of situations, like the time I came face to face with a snake lunging at me. I remembered how I felt during my first flight, and inner courage immediately built up inside me. It gave me the extra power I needed to get away. Peter pecked thoughtfully at a twig as he listened to Venus's story. I understand now why Pop says you're the most confident eagle he knows. I wish I could have the inner courage that you have, sighed Peter. You will, Peter, but maybe you just haven't found it yet. I must be off now, but remember, every bird you see flying was frightened the first time they left the nest. You can do it. Venus opened her wings and glided away. Chapter 5. Plummeting Fast. Peter looked down from his nest for the 100th time that day. The valley floor still looked a long way down, and he could feel his tummy bubbling with fright. Uncle Apollo, Ace, and Venus's words had helped, but still, what if he fell and snapped a wing? Perhaps I'll try tomorrow, he decided. Yes, that's an excellent plan. Suddenly, a strong gust of wind took him by surprise. He lost his footing, and, with a cry, he fell from the nest. "Oh no, I'm falling!" panicked Peter, desperately flapping his wings as he fell. Peter was plummeting fast. The valley floor was getting closer and closer. Then, all of a sudden, there was a flap of wings, and there, flying next to him, was Pop. "Flap your wings, Peter!" shouted Pop. "I can't!" yelled Peter. He was trying to pull the cord on his parachute. "I can't get my parachute to open, and the straps are getting in the way of my wings." Suddenly, a thought pushed its way to the front of Peter's mind. It was the thought about Uncle Apollo, Ace, and Venus. They were all scared, but they had found a way to believe in themselves. Now was the time to do it. If he could free his wings a little more, he might be able to fly. Peter took a deep breath and urgently pecked at the button to unfasten his parachute. As the parachute fell away, Peter flapped his wings, but he was still falling, and fast. The valley floor was getting closer and closer, and the thump, thump, thump in Peter's chest was getting faster and faster. What could he do? In a second, he'd be scrambled eggs. So Peter did the only thing he could think of. He flapped his wings. He flapped them as hard as he could, and suddenly, as if by magic, the ground stopped getting closer. Soon, Mom and Pop were flying alongside him. "Peter, well, look at you. How did you manage that?" shouted Mom. "I don't know," Peter shouted back, squealing with delight. "It just happened." "You're flying," Pop called to him. "Flying!" With every flap of his wings, Peter felt stronger and stronger. His confidence was soaring, and the nervous bubbles in his tummy seemed to burst. Pop, pop, pop. In an instant, everything that he had been told made complete sense. He did have a survival instinct after all. Everybody was right, he told himself. You just need to try things to find out if you can do them. Soon, Peter's wings started to ache, so he flew down to a rock to have a well-deserved rest. I'll just sit here for a second, he decided, and then I'll have another go. As he sat there, preening his wings, Mom and Pop flew down and perched next to him. That was so brave of you, his Pop squawked, looking proudly at his son. But Peter was a very honest bird. The thing is, Pop, I didn't fly from the nest. I fell. I know, his Pop smiled. I was keeping my eye on you from higher up on the cliff. What your Pop is trying to say, Mom interrupted, is that it was really brave of you to let go of that parachute. You had it on for so long we thought you'd never take it off. Well done. We're so proud. Over the next few days, Peter practiced really hard at his flying, so much so that, in no time at all, he was able to fly as high as all the other birds, even higher than the woodpeckers, the gulls, and even the condors, just like Uncle Apollo. On one of those days, as Peter was flying over the valley, he spotted his parachute on the ground below. To think I thought that thing would keep me safe, he muttered with a chuckle. And as he flew up into the fluffy clouds, he knew that if Mom had problems with her next set of hatchlings, she'd be calling on him to tell them his story, the story of Peter and the parachute. The end. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe. In the description below, I have included links where you may find and purchase this book.